With YouTube attacking alternative media, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon for just $1 per month. Link below. This is interesting here because there is a big disconnect, I think, between fans and critics of Netflix's film Bright. Now, personally, I freaking loved it. Right? I loved it. I thought the world was good, if not a little bit underdeveloped or in terms of what they showed us in the movie. I know they've since released a featurette giving us a bit more background into the lore, but this was a big success for them. I mean, looking here just at the Rotten Tomatoes, we see that it has a critical rating of 26%. But 86% audience score. Now, some could argue that the audience score means nothing and that this means, it's just stupid. But no, this has a lot to do with it. A lot of people watched it. The estimated 11.3 million people watched it in the opening weekend, which would have equated to around a roughly $90 million opening is what the estimates were. Never mind the fact that the movie itself had about a $90 million budget, and they knew what they were going to have going into it. They already greenlit a sequel. The sequel is going to be written and directed by David Ayer. Unfortunately, no Max Landis because of the allegations made against him. But ultimately, Bright was a success, and it's something that Netflix really wanted. This was them straight up competing with the studio system because there was a bidding war for this movie. They actually ended up acquiring the script for $3 million, brought in Will Smith, brought in Joel Edgerton. I mean, Will Smith in a Netflix movie? That should not be a thing. Will Smith is a bona fide movie star. And the thing is, Reed Hastings knows that. So when he says here that critics are disconnected from mass appeal, he's not wrong, actually. In the case of, let's say, Star Trek Discovery, where you have a high critical rating and a low audience score, or the Orville, where it's the exact opposite, low critical rating, high audience score, we're seeing a larger and larger disconnect between studios, or movies, or TV shows, and critics, I should say. Now, critics will come out there and they're going to be like, oh, beat their chest to try to maintain their relevance. And the truth of the matter is, I honestly feel this way. And if you are a film critic that comes across this video, I'm sorry. Most of you are cynical and just really don't like movies anymore. I think that. I do think that. I think a lot of critics out there simply just don't like movies. They like entertainment, they like the industry, but they just don't like watching anything. And that could be from the fact that they have just watched so much bad stuff over the years that everything is bad, right? And that's what it feels like to me. But here's the truth. I worked at a movie theater, many movie theaters, over the course of about 14 years. I've seen more bad movies multiple times than I should. So when I approach a film, I look at it from the best possible perspective. Was I entertained? And if that is the case, then I am happy. Like last night, I watched Geostorm, a movie that was panned by critics, made no money in the box office. I loved every second of it because I saw the inherent value for what was there. And that's just me. That maybe isn't you. And maybe I'm just being too light on certain things. That's how I view it. Anyway, so it says here that Netflix has come out fighting following the critical backlash against its big budget Will Smith blockbuster Bright. Whilst many people have watched the movie that was penned by Max Landis and directed by David Ayer, it's come in for some fierce criticism. Netflix CEO Reed Hastings, though, may have found the culprits, it's movie critics. And we saw a lot of this, by the way, in 2016, 2017. Brett Ratner was calling out movie critics. A lot of other people are calling out critics for how they respond to stuff. I mean, just real quick, look at the backlash. Fans versus critics, Ghostbusters 2016. Or fans versus critics, Star Wars The Last Jedi, right? Like, movie critics will attack something for whatever reason, or they'll defend something to the death even though they know it's horrible. Like, they keep to their own clique like everyone else does. And it's pretty apparent, especially in this industry. Now, Reed Hastings says here, the critics are pretty disconnected from mass appeal. Most of the critical reviews you read are English language, just the United States. He said that critics are an important part of the artistic process, but are pretty disconnected from the commercial prospects of a film. Now, what he's referring to there ultimately are how a movie is perceived in another culture, in another language, in other countries. And that's true. Now, one of the things that I would argue critics are right about is, let's say, for example, Independence Day Resurgence is just a good example, right? The movie, I had a lot of fun with it because I liked Independence Day. I like big disaster porn films, and especially when Roland Emmerich is at the helm. But that being said, when this happened, A lot of people were commenting on the jokes. The humor was extremely juvenile, was extremely, like, I don't want to say lazy, but it felt that way, right? Ultimately, it felt that way. And this is the sad thing, is they have to take a lot of this humor, take a lot of these jokes, and then they have to kind of dumb them down for international audiences. Now, unfortunately, this is a bit of a double-sided sword, or double-edged sword. Ultimately, what happens here is you've got translation, and just from across different cultures and different languages, you're trying to convey a joke in a way that will be universally understood. Oftentimes, that's kind of basement level bottom humor. And when you have to, when you're doing that in America, it comes across as stupid. When you do that aimed at international audiences, it comes across as, well, almost like a slap in the face. So audiences, can culturally understand, but these movies are trying to do so in a way that is easy, right? They're trying to make it as easy for them as possible to get to have the biggest reach across the board. And unfortunately, that tends to have a real big negative impact. Anyway, Reed here does go on to say that if people watching this movie and loving it, or if people are watching the movie and loving it, that's a measurement of success. And if the critics get it behind it or don't, that's a select group of social media influencers talking to a specific audience. And that's kind of it's a jab. It's a huge jab, because it's also a true jab. All right. So let me tell you guys real quick 2 cases of how you know for a fact that movie bloggers, and even, look, this applies to people like myself even, don't have the impact that they feel that they do. I don't feel like I have the impact that or anything else, but ultimately, this is what they do. You had 2012's Dread and 2013's Pacific Rim. So Dread, if you haven't seen it, you are missing out on one of the best films. Like, literally, it's a 10 out of 10 in my book. And the thing is, I'm not the only one to feel that way. There are a lot of people who feel that way, but the movie made no money in theaters. Now, Dread came out. The movie tanked its opening weekend. Film critics went out there the next week, and I mean, they wrote article after article after article trying to get people to go see this movie, trying to get people to go see it in the theater. Now, I feel blessed, hashtag, that I got to go see it in 3D, because it was the only way I could see it, and the 3D made the movie, in my opinion. And I normally hate 3D. So even though I'm telling people go see it, it's awesome, this is a good movie, these critics tried and tried and tried. Numbers didn't have any bit of an increase the next week. It wasn't until the movie hit home video and positive word of mouth came out that we ended up actually having a cult following for the film. But by then it was almost too late, and so getting a sequel is off the table. Getting a TV show, maybe. Now, the other case for that is Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim, 2013's Guillermo del Toro kaiju versus big mech battle movie. Awesome film. Awesome film. Good visual effects. A lot of fun. Just didn't reach with the audience. And we're talking mid-July, man. This should have had a huge impact. Nothing, right? Critics did the exact same thing. Sat out there very much trying to get these people, get people to watch it, write all these puff piece articles, beg their audiences to go see it. Nothing. That's just a fact. That is the cold, hard truth of where we find ourselves when it comes to these types of movies. Is ultimately these critics, they don't have the pull, the weight, or the impact that they feel like they should. And the reason why they feel like they should is because they do garner large followings on social media, and a lot of times these people are yes men. I'm just going to be honest there. People who don't ever want to be critical of these guys and their ego. And then when you get a big pushback on stuff like Ghostbusters or The Last Jedi, they get rattled. They get a little bit rattled. They get a little bit shook. They can't handle it, so they use their platform to push back, therefore further causing a divide. Now, my particular take on all this is I tend to go into every movie with the best intentions. I went into Ghostbusters 2016 with the best intentions. I so tried. It just didn't work. But I went into Bright with the same thing. I ended up loving Bright. Geostorm last night. I love Geostorm. It's just, you can like movies. It's okay to like movies. And that is one of the biggest problems when it comes to these critics, is they basically are trying to act like the gatekeepers of what is good. And you can like something or not like something. I'm not trying to pressure you one way or the other. But ultimately, that's a lot of what it boils down to. And sadly, this is just where we end up. And it's you know what? I'm just gonna come out and say it. Those kind of pundits, their days are numbered, because you can only push negativity so far. And eventually you realize that you don't have as much of an impact as you want to have, and people are going to stop coming, and ad dollars are going to dry up. And they're already seeing that with some other websites and the news front. It's eventually going to hit enthusiast press too.